If you're watching this video, something probably feels off in your relationship, but you just can't quite put your finger on what it is. As a therapist with over 19 years in the mental health field, I can tell you this, that covert narcissists are the hardest to spot. And that's exactly why they're so dangerous. I'm going to share with you some signs that most people miss, including some that might shock you when you're dealing with a covert narcissist. But first, let me tell you something important. If you're a high-achieving woman, maybe you're an executive, an entrepreneur, or even a creator, you're probably more likely to attract a covert narcissist. And guess what? There's clinical reasoning behind that, but I'll share that with you in a moment. My name is Tiffany. I've spent nearly 2 decades helping people recover from all forms of abuse, including narcissistic abuse. And what I've learned is that covert narcissists are like emotional vampires wearing a mask, fake and willing to do whatever it takes to hook you in. Yes, they're harder to detect than the obvious, most self-absorbed narcissists we hear about from time to time. But covert narcissists can be even more damaging to your mental health. So what are some of the signs you missed that you were heading towards trouble? Let me break this down. The first sign you're dating a covert narcissist is what I call the victim-hero complex. They present themselves as a perpetual victim of circumstances, but somehow they always seem to be the hero of every story they tell you. Now, the key point to reflect on is how they talked about their ex relationships. Did they describe every ex as crazy, unstable, or the problem? Do they tell you stories where they're always the reasonable one, the one who tried so hard, the one who was always wrong? Here's what's happening clinically. They're using something called projection and blame shifting to avoid accountability while simultaneously positioning themselves as your savior. They're saying things like, look how badly I was treated, but you ain't got to worry. I'll never treat you that way. If you're a high achiever, this is especially appealing because you're used to solving problems and helping people. And your success has taught you and ingrained itself that you can fix things. So when someone presents themselves as wounded but worthy, your helper instinct kicks in. The second sign is subtle superiority disguised as humility. This one is tricky because it doesn't look like typical narcissistic ignorance. They might say things like, I'm probably too sensitive for this world, or I just care too much about people. They often position their supposed flaws as virtues. They're not bragging about being better than everyone. They're bragging about being more evolved, more conscious, more empathetic. But pay attention to how they're talking about other people. Do they frequently mention how most people just can't get it? Or how they're surrounded by people who aren't on their level spiritually or emotionally? From a therapeutic standpoint, this is called covert grandiosity. They believe that they're special. But instead of being loud about it, they whisper it. And if you're a successful woman, they might even use your achievements against you, making subtle comments about how money and success can't and doesn't equal happiness, or how they value deeper things than career advancement. But guess what? I think the message is clear. They're more enlightened than you. Even if they're not as successful, doesn't work, doesn't feel real, doesn't feel good. The third sign, and this is a big one, it's emotional inconsistency that keeps you guessing. One day, they're your biggest supporter, and the next day, they're distant and cold, and you have no idea what has changed. I had a client, let's call her Trina, who was a successful marketing executive. She told me once, Tiffany, I felt like I was constantly walking on eggshells, but I just couldn't figure out what I was doing wrong. Some days he would tell me how I was this amazing person, and other days it seemed to bother him that I was even existing. This is called intermittent reinforcement, and it's one of the most powerful psychological tools used for creating addiction. Think about slot machines, right? You know that they won't pay you out every time, but they pay you out just enough to keep you pulling that lever, meaning money in, right? The covert narcissist gives you just enough validation to keep you hooked, but withdraws it unpredictably. You start believing that if you can just figure out the right formula, maybe be more supportive, less demanding, and maybe more understanding. But as a high achiever, this is particularly devastating. You know why? Because you're used to figuring things out, and your success has come from analyzing problems and figuring out solutions. But covert narcissists, there is no solution, because you know what? The problem isn't your behavior. It's theirs, and it's their need to control or their need for control. The fourth sign is passive-aggressive punishment disguised as sensitivity. When you set a boundary or express a need, they don't argue with you directly, right? Instead, they become hurt, withdrawn, or disappointed. They might say things like, "I thought you understood me better than that." Or they may say, "I guess I was wrong about how close we were." They make your boundary about their pain, right? And then all of a sudden you're comforting them instead of having your needs met. And that's not cool. This is emotional manipulation at its finest. They're training you to believe that having needs or boundaries hurts them, so you stop having them altogether. Now, I've seen this constantly with most of my high-achieving clients. You're used to being direct, setting clear expectations, and getting results. But with a covert narcissist, your directness becomes harsh, your expectations become unrealistic, and your success becomes something that makes them feel inadequate. And guess what then? They're not celebrating your wins. They're making your wins about their losses. If you recognize these patterns, and you're also someone who is successful in your career, maybe running teams, building businesses, or a content creator, I want you to understand something important. This isn't your fault, and it doesn't mean you're weak. High-achieving women often attract covert narcissists because we have something they want. You know what that is? Success, confidence, and resources. But we also have something that makes us most vulnerable. We're used to working hard to solve problems, and we often have some of the biggest hearts, and we just want to help people heal. Guess what? The covert narcissist sees your success and thinks, "I want that energy for myself." They see your compassion and think, "I want to use that to get my own needs met." You become their supply, not just their emotional supply, but their success supply. Here's what I want you to know. Recognizing these patterns is the first step of breaking free. And in my practice, I've developed what I've called the Brave Self Method, specifically for high-achieving women who are caught up in these dynamics. Now listen, Brave Self is not traditional relationship advice. It's about understanding how your nervous system constantly gets hijacked and how you can regulate your emotions independently and how to rebuild your identity separate from their validation. If these signs are hitting close to home, you know what I want you to do? I want you to go ahead and take my free assessment. Where are you in your recovery journey? And it's specifically designed for high-achieving women who are dealing with these relationship patterns. The link is going to be down below, and it takes about 2 minutes to complete. And it will show you exactly where you are in the process and what the next steps could be. Remember, your success and your big heart is not your weaknesses. They're strengths someone is trying to exploit. But now that you see that pattern, you can break it. Now, if this video helped you, please give me a thumbs up so more people can see this great content. And I want you to subscribe because there's more content coming your way to help with healing and thriving for all us high-achieving women. If someone out there needs to hear this, please share it with them. You know why? Because we all deserve a relationship that celebrates our success, and no one should be diminishing it. I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.